Good evening and welcome to our monthly national virtual gathering. We stream live here in our private online community every month. The replays are posted 2 weeks later on our YouTube channel. It's the @NLHG ORG. The National Ladies Homestead Gathering is a national nonprofit where women share and celebrate all things homesteading. So whether you're spinning wool or making sourdough or dreaming of that backyard garden, you belong here. We have 21 chapters nationwide and a vibrant online community, and we're in the process of even adding more. So welcome to all of you. Our purpose is to empower women through homesteading, and our mission is to share knowledge, build community, and grow friendships. My name's Nancy. I'm your host and also the media director of NLHG, and I'm so glad that you're all here tonight. So our biggest announcement that I quickly want to go over with you is you may have seen it on Mighty Networks or many of our social media channels, but we are having a national gathering in 2027 at Polyface Farm in Swope, Virginia. It's going to be on May 21st and 22nd. We have 2 days of learning, practical skills, and community. Dr. Temple Grandin will join us for 2 featured sessions. On Friday, women can get to know her during a live conversation and audience Q&A. That's a fantastic opportunity. And on Saturday, will be giving another presentation to all of our attendees. Friday features a full day of presentations for women, and then Saturday welcomes women and men ages 18 and older for Dr. Grandin's presentation, Polyface Farm tours, and hands-on workshops. All of the event information and registration information can be found on our website. It's https://www.nlhd.org/National Gathering Polyface. And I'm sure it will be dropped here in the comment section for you. But don't wait, our early bird pricing lasts through August 31st. So if you want to catch that early bird pricing, please go ahead and check out that website and go ahead and get registered. So our VIP sponsor or partner spotlight this month is 4 Jars canning lids. I've been using them for years. They're fantastic. They're crafted with the utmost care using high quality metal that resists bending, ensuring durability and longevity. And I have had great sealing success with 4 Jars. So we appreciate them being one of our partners, and our VIP members get a 10% discount, and all of that can be found in the VIP vault under the member discount section. So speaking of VIP, our very invested partners, it's $35 a year. And if you're interested in getting exclusive discounts, perks, and resources, please visit our website, nlhg.org. So before I get started with the presentation, I just want to say, please post your questions in the chat. We will pull from them during the Q&A at the end. And let's welcome tonight's guest speaker, Amy Hamill with Cowgirl Honey. So I just need to invite Amy. She's here waiting. It takes just a moment for that to register and connect. Hi, Amy. How are you?
Good. Excited to be here.
Good. I'm so happy that you're here. We've had you present before on mushrooms, and it was a fantastic presentation. So it's always a joy to learn from you. So just thank you again, and welcome to be our August speaker. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera and mute my microphone and let you proceed with your presentation.
Okay, I'll pull it up here just a second. Does that show a full blank screen?
I can see you, but I do not see your presentation yet.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Nope.
No. I might have to do it without the presenter view. How about that?
Mm-mm. Did you click the share your screen at the bottom
Oh,
of
probably
your?
not. See right there. Technical difficulties on my end.
That's okay. That is
There we are.
okay.
Just share. How's that?
There you go. Right now, it just is dark. There you go. I can see it. You're good to
Okay.
go.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, can you see my mouse moving?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. So we can point things out. So as Nancy said, my name is Amy Hamill. We have a farm that we call the Hamill Homestead here. We're also on Facebook as that title. And we have lots of animals and things on our farm, but I also raise bees. And I was looking for something that I could incorporate with the bees and offer that as a product. And I thought, well, how about beeswax? And I always loved soap making, so I thought, why not combine the two? So I've been making soap on a larger scale now for about 8 years, and it's been a lot of fun. So we'll take you through basically cold process soap making in this talk. There's several other processes, but that's the one we'll focus on here. But don't hesitate to ask any questions. For soap making, its history, the earliest records show that it's been about 4,800 years we've known about soap in the historical record. We don't really know its origins other than that it was perhaps discovered when they were rendering fat, and some of that fat leaked out and mixed with some of the ashes from the wood burning, and the saponification reaction happened and they had soap. And so then they found this emulsifier that helped to clean things. Little history, this farm is in Schaefferstown, Pennsylvania. It's not far from where I grew up. And under this sycamore tree right here is where I first saw soap being made from scratch. So they were burning hardwoods, making the potash, and then they mixed it with rendered lard to make soap. This is the pig pen over here, built in the mid 1700s. So it was a pretty neat experience. So from an early teen, I thought that was a neat thing. That's something I wanted to do someday. So let's talk a little bit about what is soap. So the basic definition of soap, it's a fatty acid salt. So if you take oil and lye, mix them together, you're going to get that fatty acid salt and glycerol. Pure soap is composed of fatty acids and an alkaline or a base. You cannot make soap without lye. It's the only way to get around that would be to use a pre-made soap that has already had lye added to it. And then that is like a melt and pour soap or something. But you really do need that basic solution to saponify with the oil to make that soap. Showing the chemistry of that process, we have our oil. This is a fatty acid representation. And then we have our lye. Here we're using sodium hydroxide, which lye is a common name for that. Potash is the common name for potassium hydroxide, but it's a base. And then the sodium, or the salt, mixes with the fatty acid group to become a fatty acid salt. And then we're left with glycerol. So this R is just an abbreviation of the carbon chain. Every fatty acid has a unique chain of carbons, and then it has a carboxyl group, the COOH. And you don't need to know the chemistry of that to make soap. I'm just trying to break it down to you, show you what soap actually is. Basically, we're making an emulsifier, something that will break apart molecules, the oil molecules specifically, and not let them rebond. So that way you can clean with it. So in cold process soap, we're doing a bar soap. Cold process, it's an exothermic reaction, meaning it gives off heat, but it also needs heat to proceed. So I recommend about a 3-pound bar minimum. You can go less if you have a warm area, but about a 3-pound bar so that it keeps enough heat to keep that process moving. Lye versus potash, that's sodium hydroxide versus potassium hydroxide. They're both basic alkaline formulas. Lye is your one for making the bar soap. Potash or potassium hydroxide is usually used for making your liquid soaps. And when we're making soaps, and I'll reiterate this several times throughout the talk, we always measure our ingredients by weight, not by volume. It's kind of like the pound of cotton to a pound of lead. Which one's more? You always want that standard weight in your process. And the reason for that is it goes back to the chemistry. You want to use all of the molecular weights and not just have a random volume in there. You want it to be standardized. So the first reactant we have in making soap is your fat. Any fat can be used to make soap. Some of you have probably heard the story. My husband works on a ship, and the cook told me that when he doesn't make bacon, he sees a definite decrease in morale. So they go through a lot of bacon. So they have a lot of bacon grease. Well, he gave me a ton of bacon grease. I turned it into soap and gave it back to the ship. Just any fat can be used. Basically, that's pre-rendered lard. But each fatty acid or component of that fat lends a unique property to the soap. This is a good chart I found here, this website, that shows you which properties are in what oils. So, for example, if you look up coconut oil and it has lauric acid, it will tell you how much is in there. And then you can go and cross-check that with a chart like this, which tells you, oh, lauric acid is good for hardness, fluffy lather, strong cleansing. But if you use too much, it's going to dry you out. So that's kind of how you compare and figure out what oils you want to use if you're creating a unique soap. If you just want to use up your tallow and just use straight tallow, that's fine. It'll make soap. It might be a little hard. It might not lather very well, but you'll have soap. So if you want it to lather well, you might add something like a coconut oil to your tallow to get it to lather more. So this chart can be found at soapcalc.net, and this is their oil list. And there's all sorts of oils you can look up, what fatty acids they have, what they do best in soap. But soapcalc.net is an excellent resource for any soap maker out there. We'll come back to that one as well. And in the previous slide, I showed that the saponification chart must be followed. So you cannot substitute oils in your soap. You need to choose your oil, calculate what you want to make with that, so how much sodium hydroxide it would need, and then use that in your final product. So let's say we're using 3 oils. We're going to use coconut, palm, and olive. And then I have someone who's allergic to coconut oil. So I'm just going to substitute that with tallow. It doesn't work that way. I would have to recalculate the percentages and the amount of sodium hydroxide I'm going to use. Hope that makes sense. If you have questions on that, just let me know on that one. So we have our oil reactant. We've chosen what oils we want. Now we're looking at our basic solution, alkaline solution, sodium hydroxide. Sodium hydroxide is a pH of 14 at a 1 molar concentration. So it's very strong base. So in contrast to that, you would have something like hydrochloric acid, which would be a pH of 1 at a 1 molar solution. pH is the measure of hydrogen ions. Water, pure water, would be a neutral pH of 7. 7's neutral. So anything varying off of that is going to be more acidic if it's a lower number, and more basic if it's a higher number. So sodium hydroxide is very basic, and a base can burn you just like an acid. But it needs to be respected but not feared, because just like an acid, it has its own properties. It has a purpose. It's not it will burn, but you can take care of it. So respect it in the way you handle it. Don't be sloppy. My mom used to say, well, the old saying is skinny cooks can't be trusted, but my mom used to say sloppy cooks can't be trusted, because she was very precise on not spilling. And that's how you want to treat lye. You want to be very careful with it. So just to show you what sodium hydroxide does, remember this is a basic solution of 14 on the pH scale. If we mix that with a strong acid, hydrochloric acid, which is a pH of 1, we mix the two together, sodium binds with the chlorine and we get salt, and the OH group binds with the hydrogen to give us H2O, or water. So acids and bases make water. So if you're working with sodium hydroxide, you're probably not working at a 1 molar concentration. You can neutralize that lye with vinegar. It'll take any burnout. Also, always wear personal protection equipment. Safety glasses are number 1. I don't wear gloves when I'm working with it. It doesn't bother me, but if you're more than welcome to wear gloves so you don't get it on your skin. And then if you do get it on you, just remember that vinegar will neutralize that effect, because you'll essentially make salt water. This is not vinegar's acidic formula. That's CH3COOH, but it still makes a salt and a water. For calculating your soap, this is kind of the tricky part. I hate math. Math is so important, and we'll come back to soap calc where we can check our math, but I like to write it all out by hand and even calculate the percentages if I'm using several oils, just to keep my mind sharp. It's just one of the things I like about soap making is doing the calculations. So you take the grams of oil. Remember, we're always doing measurements in weight. I like to weigh in grams rather than ounces, because grams are a smaller increment. And the smaller your increment, the more specific or more accurate you will be. For example, Fahrenheit scale, water boils at 212, but the Celsius scale, water boils at 100. So there's more divisions in the Fahrenheit scale, meaning it's a more accurate temperature than the centigrade scale. Same with grams. I like the grams for measuring rather than an ounce. An ounce is a pretty large amount, whereas if you're measuring in grams, if you're off by a gram or two, you're going to be okay. So I weigh my oil in grams. The saponification of that oil, this is where it comes into our saponification chart. We're going to multiply that by how much oil we have, and that's going to tell us how much lye we need. So a saponification chart will look something like this. It'll tell you your fat, your saponification value, which really means nothing. You don't need that in your calculation. That is the number that will convert a milligram of base, or it takes a milligram of the base to saponify 1 gram of that particular fat. So for example, beef tallow, it's going to take 196 milligrams of your base to saponify that. So if this value here is the one you want in cold processed soap, your bar soaps, because that's the sodium hydroxide, the potassium hydroxide is the value you want for your liquid soaps. But in your bar soaps, basically to get that number, they've gone to the molecular weights and they've calculated out this value, 1402.5. So if you take your average saponification value, and I say average, tallow just has 196. Something like here, like apple seed oil, 185 to 200, you'd add those together, 385 divided by 2, and just get an average, and divide that by this saponification value for sodium hydroxide. That's where they get this number. So that's the number. Let's say we have 1,000 grams of beef tallow. That's the number we want to multiply it by to find out how much sodium hydroxide to add to that. So we weighed out our beef tallow. We have 1,000 grams. Our saponification value for sodium hydroxide is 0.14. So we need 140 grams of sodium hydroxide in order to convert 1,000 grams of beef tallow to soap. Okay. Now, I say I like to do the calculations by hand. I always check myself on something else. I always double check. So I go into soapcalc.net and it brings up a screen. This might be hard to see. I'll zoom in here. And it tells you all that you have. So let's say it tells you what lye concentration you have, what percent of oil is water, if you want super fat, your water to lye ratio. I usually leave that alone unless I'm making something specific. I change the total oil weight because I'm going to have about a 3-pound bar. I'll convert that to grams, put my weight in there, and then I'll put my oils in. And down here, it shows you what oils. This particular one had several oils listed. You put in your grams of how much of each you want to use, or if you want a percentage, you can do that. It'll calculate your grams. And then it tells you if your recipe, what your bar is going to be like. If you're in the green, you're pretty good for hardness. This guy here, he doesn't cleanse very well. He's in the red. So that's a neat feature of soapcalc.net. You don't, even though your math might be right, the end product might not be what you're looking for. And this saves a lot of oils and a lot of expenses by telling you what it's going to be like. So back to our example, we calculated that we needed 140 grams of sodium hydroxide to convert 1,000 grams of beef tallow into soap. So I put 1,000 grams in my total weight. I put beef tallow in as my oil, and it came out that I need 135.47 grams of sodium hydroxide. Well, that's a little off from 140 grams. Now remember, those grams are smaller increments than something like ounces, so we're pretty much okay. But the real reason for that discrepancy is this factor right here, super fat. So this has our recipe super fatted at 5%. When I'm making soaps to share, I super fat them. I want to make sure that all of that sodium hydroxide is completely used. I've talked with friends who grew up in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, and he remembers his mom making soap. And he said, boy, that would clean you. And she never used a soap calculator. She never calculated. She did it by feel, by sight, by tradition. They prided themselves on their white soap, and they used it for laundry. It was used for everything. So they didn't really want it super fatted. They wanted it to clean. So a lot of times that was heavy on the lye. Another time you wouldn't want to super fat is if you want to use up some rancid oils. There is nothing wrong with making soap out of rancid oil. You wouldn't want to use it on your body, but if you don't super fat it, so you're going to have it a little heavy on lye, it would work great as a dish soap or a laundry soap. It can be used. I don't like to use it, but it can be used. So you've done your calculations, you know your recipe, you know what you want to make. So now gather your equipment for making that soap. So you want to get all your ingredients. This includes your additives and your fragrance oils, if you want any color, anything extra that you might need for that batch of soap. I've done it before where I've been on autopilot and I've made my soap. I come to trace, it looks beautiful, and I forgot to get out the fragrance oil. So I have to run and go get my fragrance oil. Well, in the meantime, my soap's at trace, so it keeps setting up, and now it's thick. And now I have this thick pudding to try to mix fragrance oil into. So it's best to just get all of your ingredients together before you start. Next piece of equipment that is essential to making soap is a good scale. This is the one I like best. It has, you can convert the units to grams, ounces, pounds. Again, I use grams. Just make sure that any digital equipment that you're using, your batteries are fresh, or at least good. I've done it before where I was mixing up soap, and I'd done it so many times. I was kind of in a routine, and it just didn't seem right. I kept adding oil and I kept adding oil and the scale didn't change. I'm like, I just must be me. I made my batch of soap and it was a complete flop. And then I realized my batteries were almost dead in my scale, and it just wasn't registering what I was putting on it, even though I was adding to it. So just make sure your batteries are up to date if you're using anything digital. You'll want a large and a small kettle. The large kettle's for your oils, the small kettle for your sodium hydroxide. These are my preferred ones just because they're a high side, so that when I mix it, it's not splattering out. This one has enough room. This is a 12 cup. It has enough room to add the sodium hydroxide to it. They have lids with them so that if I need to let it cool, I can protect it from bugs or dust or anything that might get into it, kids. So your kettles are important. They also must be stainless steel. You do not want to use aluminum kettles at all because that will react with the sodium hydroxide. So make sure you're using stainless steel, nice heavyweight deep kettles best. And then something to stir with. There is nothing wrong with stirring a batch of soap with a stir stick. It will take a while, but there's nothing wrong with it. My favorite way to stir soap is immersion blender. And I like the kind that comes apart so I can clean them. This is the one I have. I don't think it's made anymore, but it's a maximum 200 watt power. That's hard to find. Everybody wants more power in their stir sticks. I don't want that much power when I'm doing soap. I don't want to suck everything down. I just want to mix it nicely. So that's my recommendation, is to use a stir stick, but one that's low power. And also, if you're not comfortable or haven't used an immersion blender before and you want to upgrade from a stick to a blender, practice on water first to see how it reacts, because you don't want to stick that immersion blender into a batch of sodium hydroxide for the first time and splatter it all over yourself. So the best thing to do is practice first, see how your piece of equipment reacts. Another thing you'll need for making soap is a thermometer. I started off with the dial type thermometers. They work great, but then you have soap on your stick and you have to wipe that off. And then you have sodium hydroxide on your stick and you have to wipe that off. I switched over to infrared thermometer and I love it. I just hold it there and zap it and see what temperature we're at. It's not failed me at all for the consistency in soap making. So that's been a great asset. And lastly, your mold. You can put soap in pretty much anything. My mold happens to be, my dad's friend is a woodworker. And when I go back to visit my dad, I make him a bunch of pies and he always takes one over to his friend. So his friend knew I made soap and he made me a nice cherry wood soap mold pegged together. But you don't need anything fancy. I've heard people use Pringles cans for soap. Anything that will hold water, you can use for soap. If you are using a silicone mold, a lot of times these wooden boxes will have a silicone mold insert. If you add a little bit of salt, like a teaspoon, to your sodium hydroxide mixture, that will help that soap bar release easier from the silicone mold. The silicone mold tends to suction onto your soap even after it's cured. So some considerations that we talked about: all your measurements are in weight. I prefer grams. In fact, the very first thing I do, if I get a recipe that has oil, that has ounces, I convert them right to grams. I like grams for measuring my soap, because you can be off by a gram too, and it's not the end of the world. It's just a gram. I'm also super fatted, so if I'm off a little bit, I'm still okay. Always use a saponification chart. Don't just substitute oils. So use your chart and do the math to figure out how much sodium hydroxide you want. And then be aware that there are some reactions of your ingredients. For example, if you're adding sugars, such as milk is a sugar, honey, or something like that to your soap, that's going to increase the heat. And if you add more than is recommended, or you just wanted to add more and you bundle it up really well and it overheats, it can kind of form a volcano and spill out of your mold. So things like that can react. Another thing would be some fragrances tend to react with your soap. Vanilla in particular will cause it to seize. So I don't make any vanilla fragrance soaps. That's just not what I do, because it's too much of a pain to work with to try to get it to stir into my batch of soap. It just seizes. Some don't completely seize, but they do what's called ricing, and it looks like there's little rice kernels all through your soap bar, and that's just a reaction of that fragrance with your soap. The process, so you're going to measure in grams and weigh your oils and melt them together, and that's going to be in your large kettle. And then you're going to do the same with your sodium hydroxide. Measure out your sodium hydroxide, and I actually measure out my water and pour the sodium hydroxide into the water, stir it up. That will heat up. It can easily get to boiling. So I keep my smaller kettle away from me, away from my face. You don't want those vapors to come up. You definitely don't want to breathe them. The other thing I do, I put that smaller kettle in an ice water bath or a cold water bath just to keep that temperature down, because it will easily go above boiling. So you mix your oils, you melt them, you mix your sodium hydroxide and your water, and now you want to get them to the same temperature. So whether that means letting them sit or warming them up, either way, you need that temperature to come to that range. Now, when I was teaching nursing chemistry back in college, we made soap in one of the labs, and the instructor was very precise that you had to have your oils at 100 degrees and your base at 100 degrees, your alkaline, and then put them together. And so I always aim for that, to have my temperatures very, very similar, but you don't have to. A range is okay. So about 95 to 110 is okay to mix your sodium hydroxide and your oils. If, say, your sodium hydroxide's at 95 and your oils are at 100, it's okay that they're not exact. I always shoot for exact. I try to limit any variable, but if they're not, it's okay. That said, because this is an exothermic reaction, it moves forward with heat. If you're making a soap where you want to do a lot of detailing, a lot of swirling, you'll want it on the cooler range, a cooler side, like the 95, so you have time to make some swirls. Whereas if you have it up at the higher temperature, the 110, it's going to thicken faster, and so you don't have as much time to play with it. The other thing, though, if you are looking at those temperatures and you want to do a lot of swirls, so you say, okay, I'm going to stay on the low end, just be aware that that low end may be low enough for some of your oils to start to re-solidify. And so you don't want to come to a false trace when those oils are solidifying. So you have your temperatures the same on your oil and your base. Add your base to the oil. So I just pour it in. That's where those kettles come in really nice. They have a pour spout. I just pour my base into the oil. Now, it's not like adding acid to something. If you go the opposite way, if you pour oil into base, it's not going to explode. But it's much more safe to add the base to the oil because it's not going to splash. So I just always add the base to the oil. It'll sink to the bottom of the pot, and then I have time to set my kettle aside, and now I'm working with my one kettle. Now the point to stir to trace. So you can stir it with a butter knife, a chopstick, or you can use your immersion blender. But the key is to come to trace. And trace kind of looks like turkey gravy, is how someone explained it to me. A very light trace, and it gets thicker and thicker as it proceeds. If you're doing layers of different colors, you might want to go a heavy trace on the bottom, and then a medium trace, the next layer, and then a light trace, so that they don't mix together. But typically I do one, maybe two colors, and so I like to do a light trace and then just pour it in and let it go. I don't do too many flowery things with my oils, but you need to get it to trace, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Once it's at trace, you're going to add your fragrance, if you want to. And you want to wait until you're at trace so that you don't get a false trace. For example, that vanilla would make your oil seize. And if you're not at trace, those oils are going to separate out from that base. Once you have everything in there, you pour it into your mold. Cover and insulate it for at least 24 hours. So it depends on the soap and what additives you have, but 24 hours ballpark figure. You're going to cover that. You want to keep that warm. Remember, it's an exothermic reaction, so it's giving off heat, but it also needs heat to drive forward. So you want that reaction to be complete. You want all of your sodium hydroxide used. So let it sit for a day, then remove it from the mold, cut it into bars, and then you let them cure for 4 to 6 weeks. And that cure time, once you have bars that you can handle, most 99.9% of your sodium hydroxide has been used up, but that cure time completes that. It also lets the water evaporate, excess water evaporate from the soap. It makes a nice harder bar, makes it last longer, just an overall better product. So key considerations when you are making your soap is you can have that range of temperatures. Just remember, if you have a lower temperature, you can work a little more with it. The higher temperatures, you need to move a little faster. Identifying trace. In this picture here, you can almost see that turkey gravy sheen here. But there, that path that you see in the oil, that's your trace. That's kind of between light trace and medium trace. And usually, like I say, I do a light trace. And this time I was trying to get a video of it while I was stirring it. So I was stirring it more than normal. So it kind of started going farther on trace. If I'm worried about it, if I wonder if I was seeing that sheen right, I'll go ahead and take it to medium trace. There's nothing wrong with that. The only thing is you want it to pour into your molds, not glop into your mold. So I'll just show you that a couple times. You can see what trace is there. And lastly, you want to keep it warm as it goes through the gel phase. And again, that keeping it warm is going to keep that reaction moving forward, getting all that sodium hydroxide used up. And when I say gel phase, if you were to peek at your soap within that 24-hour period, it's going to stop looking like a bar of soap, and it goes almost translucent. It looks like it's become gel in the mold, and then it goes back to being a bar of soap. And this one here, I just heated up to kind of simulate a gel phase, what it would look like. Almost has a translucent, darker look to it than the regular bar. And that's just part of that warming process, part of the chemical reaction of converting your oil into a soap. So why do we stir to trace? And this is very important to stir to trace. So trace is basically the point of no return. That's where the oils and the lye will no longer separate. So if you pour your soap before coming to trace, let's say you thought you were at trace, you added your fragrance oil, it made it look like it was at trace, but it really wasn't. It wasn't at trace. It was just a false trace. So if you pour it too early, during that gel phase, some of the oil will come out of that solution and it won't be part of the reaction. And so you'll get this block of soap that might be crumbly on top and gooey on the bottom. And nobody wants to wash with that. So trace is very important because that's where they're going to be mixed together and you can't separate them at all. So tips and tricks I mentioned I use a cold water bath when I stir the lye into the water, just to keep it from boiling, from vaporizing so much. And it easily comes down to temperature then, whereas if you can have 200 and some degrees and now you have to wait around for it to come down to 100 degrees, put it in a cold water bath and it'll come down a lot faster. The other thing I do is I keep a logbook, the old classic chemistry notebook style, whatever you like to use. If you like to use index cards, spiral notebook, but keep a logbook not only of what you did, what went wrong, but what went right, what your favorite recipes are. And then you can build off of those if you want to change something, if you want to make that same recipe but add oatmeal to it, something like that. So a logbook, I've referenced my logbook over the years so many times, it's about to fall apart. So that's a very important piece of equipment in my soap making process. Additives to soap, these include milk, honey or sugar, salt, abrasives, whether it's pumice. I use gem state or garnet sand in some of mine. Herbs, colors, fragrance. Herbs, you want to use dried herbs. If you use fresh herbs, they can rot in there if they don't get completely immersed in the soap. If it doesn't penetrate in the herb. For example, lavender. If you put fresh lavender flowers in your soap, it looks pretty going into the mold. It's beautiful. You cut it and it looks like mouse droppings in your soap. So you definitely want to use your dried herbs in there. Abrasives. Some people like oatmeal in their soap. It's best to use an oatmeal powder. Make sure it's pulverized. If you just put oats in the soap, it will be like razor blades going across your skin. So some of those things you want to keep in mind. Don't just dump things in there. Colors, a lot of your natural colorings will just turn brown. Beet pulp or beet powder turns brown, but some keep their color. I use turmeric for the yellowish orange. I use a lot of clays. I use purples and red clay to get those colors. And I use chlorella powder for the greenish color. And that one won't turn brown. That one keeps its color through the saponification process. And lastly, fragrance. You're going to add about an ounce to a 3-pound bar. I like my homemade soaps to smell good. So I go a little heavy on the fragrance, and I use essential oils. You can mix them, and the amount you want to use and what mixes you want to use is up to you. A lot of your companies will tell you if that fragrance is going to hurt your trace. Is it going to rice in the soap? Is it going to make your soap seize? And you can find that on the fragrance supplier. Most of the essential oils that I've used, I haven't had any trouble when I'm stirring it after trace. So why should you measure in weight and not in volume? I'll give you a minute if you want to type in your answer. You don't have to. But densities of your oils vary. So you're going to have different masses. So like I mentioned, a pound of cotton or a pound of lead, a pound of cotton is going to take up a lot more area, but they weigh the same. So because your sodium hydroxide is based on molecular weights and using up all of those molecules, you want to measure by weight. So a smaller increment of weight, like I said, using grams instead of ounces, that's going to increase your accuracy. So if you're off by a gram or two, it's not like being off by an ounce or two. So why should oils not be substituted in a soap recipe? So remember, any oil can make soap, and you should make soap with any oil, but you don't want to substitute them out. And why not? So each oil has its own saponification value. Again, that's based on the molecular weight they figured out. It's the milligrams of the base that it takes to saponify 1 gram of the oil. So it's unique to that oil. So if you just switch them out, now you're shifting that milligram amount. So do each calculation separately for each oil. If you want to change an oil in your soap, recalculate the whole thing. And lastly, why should scents be added after trace? And this goes back to they can act differently in soaps, causing them to be thicker or appear to be in trace when it's not. So then you can have that separation after you've poured it, and it doesn't turn into soap. It's just crumbly and gooey. So you want your trace to be complete before you add any scents. Your colorings, like your clays, a lot of times I will add those to the oil themselves itself, so it gets mixed in really well. If you add like clay powder to your oil and sodium hydroxide after it's been mixed for a little bit, but before trace. A lot of times your powder will tend to not get mixed or incorporated thoroughly, and you get little clumps of powder in your final product. So with that, are there any questions?
We do have some questions. So if you want to stop sharing your screen, and then they'll be able to see both of us. Oh,
Okay.
let's leave that up there for a second. Go ahead and talk about that real quick.
Last one up there. These are some books that I like. Two websites I like. I like the soapcalc.net. That's for your calculations, and save your work. You can save the recipe, and that way you know what you did before, and then you can go back and say, okay, I want to change this part of it. Or if it's not showing you all green on sudsing and cleansing, and you want that to be all green, you can change little aspects and see what you did. So it's nice that you can save as a PDF what you've done so far. Another good soap or site is lovelygreens.com. She's based over in the Isle of Man in the UK, but she has some nice recipes and does a lot of natural soap making. So those are just some that I enjoy. And I believe this presentation will be saved, correct? So
yeah, so the copy of this presentation will be put in the VIP vault, and it will be a resource available indefinitely. So
yes,
yeah, we'll put that all in there.
Any of these that you want, you can look up there. You can also email me. I don't have my email on here. It's farm anchor.
We have it posted in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, if you have questions. So I will stop sharing that.
Yeah. So when I was looking through the discussion, because we promote the talk through the month, and it seems like a common theme I was seeing with some of the questions was some of the women feel intimidated by trying to make soap. So what would you say to someone who's nervous to give it a try?
I understand the intimidation with anything. For me, it was with beekeeping because I was nervous of messing it up. You're not going to ruin anything except for maybe a couple pounds of oil and a little sodium hydroxide. If you're completely scared of handling a base, handle some vinegar. That's an acid, so it can burn, but it's not. I mean, it's like caustic. It's not going to. If you wear your personal protection equipment, like your safety glasses are number one, wear gloves. It's not going to eat through you before you can clean yourself off. It doesn't bother me at all, but I've worked with batteries and sulfuric acid. So I'm kind of used to handling those different chemicals. But just be careful. Be aware of what you're doing when you're pouring it. Keep your workstation isolated so that you don't have interruptions coming through. 2-year-olds running by, trip hazards, things like that. But just try it. I mean, the worst that can happen is you'll be out some oils and some base. If you just want to practice without adding any colors or any fragrance. I mean, soap without fragrance isn't very fun, but you get the feel for it. I'm in North Idaho. If you want to come make soap with me sometime, come on over. But yeah.
So can you smell? Okay, so the soap you made with bacon fat, does it smell like bacon?
It does not. So I clean my fat 3 times.
Uh-huh.
Kind of like rendering, but it's basically already rendered.
Uh-huh.
So the first time I use salt and I basically re-render it. Then I do it 2 more times. I wash it with water and render it. I don't use salt the next 2 times because every time you use salt, it'll get softer. And so I only use salt the first time to kind of clean it up. And then it's just pure white. It's like lard. So
Interesting. So let's see, someone brought up the cost of handmade soap at farmers markets. So
Hmm.
once you understand what goes into making a bar of cold processed soap, what are some things that people may not realize that they're actually paying for?
The oils are expensive. I buy in bulk as much as I can. Olive oil right now is running around $6 a liter. I use about a liter in a 4-pound bar, something like that.
Hmm.
I get palm oil. I buy sustainable palm oil from Azure, and that's about $50 for a 35-pound box. My memory serves. Coconut oil. I get the big tub, the organic at Costco, and that's running now at $17.99 for what is that, about a gallon?
Hmm.
Um, it used to be $12.99, then it went up to $19.99. Now it's back down to $17.99. But the oils are expensive. Sodium hydroxide is not that expensive. I'm told you can find it in the camping section at like Ace Hardware.
Hmm.
I haven't used it there. I buy mine in a 50-pound bag. But it doesn't add to a huge overall cost. The biggest cost probably is your fragrances, especially if you're
Hmm.
using essential oils. Like I put an ounce of essential oil. So I basically have $1.50 of fragrance in every bar of soap,
Okay.
on average. Some
Hmm.
fragrances are a lot more than others, but they add up fast. And that just reminded me, sodium hydroxide is not that expensive. And your first question was intimidated about it. Well, Drano is
Hmm.
basically sodium hydroxide in gooey form.
Hmm.
So,
That's interesting. I didn't
yeah,
know that. Okay, let's see. So because it takes 4 to 6 weeks for these to cure. So if you want to make some for homemade gifts for the holidays, this is the perfect time to start
right. Yep.
messing
Plan
around
ahead.
with it, trying it out,
Hmm.
and getting everything to cure.
Yep. And then you can have your kids be the testers on your
Hmm.
little, on your practice runs.
Right. So you were, I think I bought a Huckleberry
Hmm.
soap from you before. So is that a huckleberry fragrance, or can you use freeze dried huckleberries or dried huckleberries or any dried fruit? Can you do that or no?
You would want to pulverize that, and then that might turn brown. I haven't tried that
Okay.
one. You can use purees in your soap. If it's completely pureed, that would be like adding milk. What you don't want is any chunks in there where the lye is not going to get to and penetrate, and then you would have something that could rot in there. So I color mine. That one's colored with a purple and a red clay to give me that huckleberry color. And then
Hmm.
that's a fragrance oil.
Okay.
And fragrance oils vary. I don't like just buying a fragrance oil I see on Amazon. Um, I have a supply company in Spokane that they go through and they rate everything on that oil as far as sensitivity to skin. They want a safe oil. They're really good with
Hmm.
that. Brambleberry.com. They're a big soap supply company. I haven't seen those same ratings on their fragrance oils, but I'm sure they have them. So I list on my soap if it's a fragrance oil or essential oil. I like essential oils, but some things you just can't do in essential oil. For rose, for
Hmm.
example, if you were to put rose essential oil in your
It's
soap, it
expensive,
would
right?
work. It would make good soap, but you'd have to sell it for $50 a bar.
Hmm.
So I use fragrance oil for the rose, and I make sure my fragrance oils have been tested to be safe.
Right. I guess the same thing would go with making candles, kind of same
Mhm.
fragrance oils for that process too.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Oh, for someone making soap specifically for gifts, are there certain recipes, scents, or types of bars that you think are especially good for beginners?
I use a palm, olive, and coconut blend. Um,
Hmm.
that one's makes a nice bar. Your palm oil is very it's just a good overall hard bar. Your coconut is very cleansing, adds a lot of lather, and then the olive oil is a hard bar and it's very good for your skin. It's just a nice basic uh blend for your soap. Tallow soap would work, but depending on the rendering of tallow, and I've even bought commercially rendered tallow that my
Mm-hmm.
bars just smell beefy even afterward, and that's just kind of disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
So I make sure my tallow doesn't smell before going into the soap, and then it won't smell afterward.
Mm-hmm.
So beginner soap, I'd recommend something simple like an olive or a coconut, something that you can easily acquire. You can do lard. Lard doesn't have the beefy smell tallow does. So if you render your own lard, you can definitely do that. Olive
Mm-hmm.
oil is readily available at the grocery store. Coconut oil, readily available. So you could try a smaller amount with those. Again, if you're doing a cold process, you're going to want to do it at least a 3-pound bar, and then or mold, big bar, you should say, and then cover it and insulate it for that reaction to complete. You can't just pour one and see how it works, like pour a bar and see how it
Mm-hmm.
works. You need to do the whole loaf. But I would
Okay.
recommend any cheap oil that's good for your skin. See how that reacts.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I know we have a couple of experienced soap makers joining us tonight. So is there a technique, ingredient, or type of soap you think is worth trying once you've mastered the basics? Like, is there a more advanced technique?
I'm sure there are. um, I don't do the frilly designs in mine. I want my soap to be practical, but also so useful and nice on your skin. I'm also running an entire farm, so I'm not spending a lot of time with the fancy designs. I've seen some soap making pages where they make soap that looks like the gilded edges of an old book where it has that peacock feathering. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I don't do that. I keep it simple with my colorings and my scents. But as far as if you wanted to go fancy, well, my next one that I want to try is to make a clear soap, so to
Oh.
move that reaction, so it kind of looks like
Mm-hmm.
a translucent the glycerin soap,
Mm-hmm.
but make that from scratch rather than from a melt and pour. So there are some things that you can get fancier, but your soap making process, it's really basic. Like I said, it's been around almost 5,000 years. Oil and base, mix them together.
Mm.
Keep
Well,
it
I've
simple.
bought a number of your soaps and I think they're amazing, and I gave them away
Yeah,
as gifts for Christmas. And so I think you do a really great job with how you make your soap. And it smells
thank you.
lovely and it looks really, really nice. So
Thank you.
I have
Well, one
one
thing,
final, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say one thing on that is the saponification, or the oil quality chart. My husband asked me to develop a shampoo bar, and I had no
Mm-hmm.
idea what to do for that. So I knew I wanted a lot of lather, because you kind of want lather when you wash your hair. So I went through and researched all the oils and said, which one's going to come up with a good lather? Which one can I use for this? And that's how I developed my bar. I went through those oils and then put it into soap calc.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, I could see too, and being on a ship where a shampoo bar would probably be easier to maintain and have instead of big old bottles of shampoo in the
Yeah.
showers.
And flying to the ship.
Right, exactly. So the last question I had before we go is, do the bars come out of a wooden mold as easy as a silicone mold?
They do not. Like I say, you can add the salt to get them out of a silicone mold easier. You can line that. Sometimes I'll use wax paper to line that mold,
Mhm.
and then I can lift it out much easier.
The wooden
Um,
mold?
yes.
Mhm.
Um, I actually don't use that one as much as I use my I have a wooden mold made out of particle board, and the little bit of indentation on that, you might say, allows it to release a lot easier. Some people line it with those really, really thin garbage bags, like the super thin ones that you look at and they break apart. Some
Mhm.
people line them with that. If I do that, I'll line it with wax paper first so I can lift it out, because a lot of times those will just tear, lifting your bar
Mhm.
out. But if you pour it straight into the wood, it doesn't come out very easily.
Okay. Well, thank you for answering that. And thanks again, Amy, for joining us. It's always a pleasure. You're such a wealth of knowledge. I just love how you teach and you share everything. It's a super understandable way, and we appreciate you being also part of our NLHG community. I see you in Mighty Networks a lot, so it's just always a joy to have you.
Oh, thank you. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So everyone, we will be back on September 2nd for our September National Virtual Gathering. And we're going to be welcoming back Tawny Ledger, the Mountain Mama. You may remember she joined us and showed us how to make sauerkraut and some fermented salsa. And she's going to be back teaching us hunting basics for women. So be sure to monitor Mighty Networks and click that reminder so you know when the presentation is coming up. And I look forward to seeing everyone next month. And Amy, thanks again.
Thank you.
Okay, bye everyone. Thanks for joining us.